Okay, there we go. We're recording. All right. Okay, Milo, congratulations on being chosen as the Distinguished Alumnus Award recipient for 2020. This was not chosen by me, although I do think that you're quite earning of the award, deserving of the award. But this was chosen, as you probably know, by the Alumni Association Board of Directors, what we call the Alumni Board. It was a nomination process, and you were chosen by the Alumni Board as this year's Distinguished Alumnus Award recipient. So congratulations on that, by being chosen by your peers for a lifetime of service and influence in the classroom, etc. And so what I want to do is I want to hear kind of your Greenville story. And so I'll kind of walk you through some questions, but largely this is about you and your story, both at Greenville and probably a little bit before Greenville, and then especially with your career afterwards. So tell us, can you tell us the years that you were at Greenville College at that time?
I was a student from 1952 to 1956, and I went to Greenville, though I had a scholarship elsewhere, Ohio State, in fact, because I had two older brothers who had graduated. My brother Ken became an MD with a good prep at Greenville, and my oldest brother Walter also got his bachelor's degree there. And it was always assumed that I too would go to Greenville. And I'm just almost like by way of preparation, I returned to Greenville on a number of occasions. Once I returned because I had founded the Council on Social Action in the denomination, and I came back to represent that. And then for 10 years, I was, president of Men's Ministry International, formerly Light and Life Men. And I came back to represent that. And then I spoke at a couple alumni banquets, and earliest of all, Mary Tenney urged my return for a chapel talk, and my chapel talk was on Christ versus the liberal arts, and people were in consternation because they weren't sure that it was ironic, but of course it was. Though I told of how many colleges founded as Christian institutions, like Harvard and Yale and 1,000 others, had in fact lost their Christian moorings. So liberal arts did seem to have a talent for undermining Christian faith, but that certainly was not the case with Greenville, because Greenville has had a wonderful gift for turning out Christians, including many professionals, for whom great learning has not meant the loss of faith. Now, if you let me continue, because with your fine list of questions, I want to honor a couple people.
Yes.
Mary Tenney, whose sister was the wife of the great Defoe scholar here at Urbana, A.W. Secord. Mary Tenney was his sister-in-law, and Mary taught me 3 different writing classes. The first one, I was a freshman, and the course was exposition. I didn't take the regular freshman sequence. And in that class was Don Bastian, who later became Canadian bishop after being pastor at Greenville. And those 3 courses in writing that I had from Mary Tenney, so ably taught, meant that in 1956, I won the Atlantic's National Story Contest for college students, which really was my entree into Yale. But I also want to mention Brock Brentlinger, who became dean.
Mhm.
But about 3 years before I arrived on campus, he had come within an eyelash of winning the Illinois State debate tournament. But he broke his glasses before the last round, so that was scotched. But he was a marvelous debate coach. And in fact, the Cronkite-Werner team went to West Point and came in fourth in the country.
Hmm.
And the Cronkite-Werner team and Billings and I tied with several other Illinois colleges for the first place in the Illinois Intercollegiate. And that meant, of course, competing against 40 other Illinois institutions. But great preparation from Brock Brentlinger and from Mary Tenney. And then there was the incomparable presence of that comic genius, Watson Tidball, often known as Tidson Wadball. Okay. But one summer I took a reading course and ended up ordained as a local ministry, which meant that I got another chunk of my tuition off.
Mhm.
So when I came back and presented that to Watson, he gave me the so-called hairy eyeball, because that meant with my freshman scholarship, I was only paying a few dollars a year for tuition.
Sure.
But some old timers will remember that in the early 50s, the top salary after 40 years at Greenville was $4,000.
Wow.
But tuition was $11 an hour.
Oh, man.
So a year's tuition was just a little over $300.
Mhm.
But what I'm reading now, I don't know about Greenville's tuition, but now tuition up here would be something like $20,000.
It's a little more.
Yeah.
So in addition to what you just laid out, what other parts of your Greenville College experience stand out to you today, especially when you look back at your career and the things that you've done and been able to be a part of?
Okay, that's a good question. For 2 years, one of the traveling quartets was the King's Heralds, a male quartet.
Mhm.
And the music talent really was Ralph Knepper, who ended up directing for years the choir up at Zion, Illinois, and taking his choir to sing for the Pope.
Wow.
But our quartet traveled internationally because we traveled U.S., Canada, and Dominican Republic. And we recruited a few students, raised a little money. But I've never been good at reading music, just like Watson Tidball, by the way. I can read one line, but I don't read music well. But the prep there meant that I ended up singing 2 years with the orchestra chorus of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. So that was a good prep. I'm grateful for that.
Mm-hmm. For those people that don't know you or don't know your career, can you give a kind of an overview of where you've been after your days at Greenville College?
Okay, I had a year at Urbana,
At University
studying
of
with
Illinois?
madmen for my master's degree, studying with A.W. Secord, the Defoe Scholar, and Harris Madman Fletcher, the famous Miltonist, who put together the world's best collection of Milton editions, which we have housed right here. But I also took a course from Fred Will, who's the father of the columnist George Will. And with Fred Will, I still studied Hume, Darwin, Marx, and Freud. And if you could study those four and remain a Christian, you were doing well. So that was the fiery trial.
Mhm.
Reading Marx, Hume, Freud, and Darwin with Fred Will, George Will's father. But after a year here, I went to Yale for 3 years,
Mhm.
studied with the great scholar Louis Martz, who had won a prize with his book on the poetry of meditation, and he sicked me on the question, how does meditation figure in Puritan literature, particularly Bunyan? And out of that came a Yale book and my tenure here at Urbana. And they say that you need one book for tenure, but preferably 2 books. And I was nominated more than once for the full professorship, but I declined because amazingly, surprisingly, unpredictably, about 6 years into my career here, God spoke out of the whirlwind. He spoke unmistakably. He said, scholarship is not your future, it's Christian poetry.
Hmm.
But it was 20 years before the poems really started coming out. And since retirement, I've published 6 volumes
Great.
of poetry, and I'm working on another one right now.
That's wonderful. That's
So
wonderful.
that's a sketch. Yeah.
Sure. And now, outside of your professional work, you were and perhaps still are pretty involved with the local Free Methodist Church there in Champaign or Urbana, correct?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we're very capably pastored by Herb Coates, the younger Coates. Great family, great Illinois family. I have served as finance chair, missions chair, taught college graduates for 20 years in a Sunday school class, and helped found a multi-ministry center, the Empty Tomb Ministries, which has had more than 40 years service now, and organizing volunteers from 30 area churches for food, free food, furniture delivery, free clothes, etc. But also my long-term friend, John Ronsval, has just put out his 22nd annual study of church giving in the United States. And I'm putting copies of that and have been putting copies in the Greenville University Library because it is the best work extant, and experts acknowledge this, on patterns in church giving in this country. And it all began when I asked John a question about an anomaly in Free Methodist giving, because for years, Free Methodists were at the very top in percentage of giving because we were taught tithing. Okay. And in working through that anomaly, John discovered the whole file of the annual yearbooks of church giving for US and Canada. So without realizing it, I put him on his career of scholarship on American church stewardship. And one interesting result is that Free Methodists have remained near the top nationally in percentage being given to the church. But like almost all churches, that annual scholarship has revealed that giving to benevolence has been in long-term decline. So you asked about our Mattis Avenue Free Methodist Church, and we keep lighting the fires there. But long-term, there's a decline. But I will mention this. I published a little book on the unselfish local church with all the numbers, most of them drawn from Empty Tomb research, on how any local church with any gumption could get 30% of their receipts beyond the church walls.
Hmm.
And we are doing that now at Mattis Avenue.
Great.
With a very capable treasurer, very capable staff.
Mm-hmm.
But that message needs to go out because the historic trends have been for local churches to become more and more selfish.
Mm-hmm.
They spend the money on buildings, on staff, and on themselves.
Yes. And what was that book you just referred to?
The Unselfish Local Church.
Sure.
That actually was published by, that's a Free Methodist publication, but it would be hard to find a copy now. But I would send you a copy if you really wanted it.
Yeah, I'd love to read it. Sure.
Okay.
Good. So how long did you teach at the University of Illinois?
32 years.
Wow.
Okay. That was after 1 year teaching at what is now North Park University. Mm-hmm. Helen was finishing a master's degree at U of Chicago. We took 2 years in Chicago. I had a postdoc here. Fascinatingly, the Danforth Foundation ran a fellowship program for 20 years. Mm-hmm. And that was the most generous fellowship program imaginable because it paid my way through the PhD. It also paid for my postdoc year, and it paid for Helen's tuition through her master's degree at U of Chicago.
Oh, man.
The Danforth money, the Danforth Foundation based in St. Louis, that's Ross and Purina. Mm. And it's ground grains, it's cat and dog food. Mm-hmm. But they were wonderfully generous for 20 years in supporting a total of a few thousand Danforth fellows who now are scattered in teaching positions. One became president at Princeton, and another became the #1 scholar in science and religion relations. Mm-hmm. But that's my good word for the Danforth Foundation and how it supported us through those 2 years in Chicago.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to ask you about your advice. What advice would you give to current Greenville University students? From your standpoint as an alum that's done a lot in academia and in writing, et cetera, if you were to get in front of a lot of current college students in Greenville, what would you tell them?
Well, a word of wisdom from Mary Alice Tenney, my English prof, and from Don Bastian, who was for years the Greenville pastor. Mm-hmm. Mary Alice Tenney said, "Establish some firm devotional traditions and keep them up forever." Okay? Mm-hmm. You have to have the daily discipline. And you can withstand any wind of current, wind of doctrine or heresy that comes by. And the other word was from Don Bastian, who one Sunday evening developed a little parable about Pilgrim. And of course, a lot of my writing has been on Bunyan. Mm-hmm. But his wisdom about the Christian pilgrim was, you stick it out to the end. You don't give up. There's the Slough of Despond and Hell's Mouth and Doubting Castle. Yes, Doubting Castle. But you stick it out. You make a vow that you're going the whole way. And of course, those are both inspirations from what I would call Greenville people.
Mm-hmm. Right. Do you have? I appreciate you answering my questions about you and your work and your volunteer service. Is there anything else that you'd like to put out to the Greenville community at large?
When I return to Greenville, I get the sense that I am under a great umbrella. Mm. A great dome of protection. I'm aware that I'm in a community that is sustained by prayer, by faithful, obedient Christians. And that is precious beyond words. But the world is different. Okay. And I'm afraid I know persons who, products of Christian colleges, who lost their faith. Okay. But I don't know of anyone I've known who has graduated from Greenville who's lost their faith. One of my colleagues briefly was a Wheaton graduate who lost his faith. Yeah, and there are other stories like that. But Greenville really lives out what it means to be a Christian disciple, a Christian believer, and devoted, faithful faculty. And all the reports I heard, maybe things have changed under recent administrations, but I remember another one of my profs, Dean Tade, who went on to become dean at Texas Christian, I think. Dean Tade, when he was on faculty at Greenville, was offered a job at 3 times his salary at Greenville. But he stayed with Greenville. He had the vision. And it's Greenville College, and I appreciate the department, Ivan Philby, his managing to make his own faith real to other people. It wasn't top dressing, it was no veneer. The faith was genuine, and one did feel that with Greenville faculty.
Good. Thank you for that. I really appreciate your time, Milo. But I also, thank you for your service to your area and to your profession. You are, again, very deserving of the Distinguished Alumnus Award. And I personally, I'm almost a little bit relieved that we can't do the normal event because I wouldn't do a half-hour conversation in front of a big group of people. So
let me
go ahead.
Let me say this.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's Zoom too, because last year Stan Walters stumbled when somebody stumbled when he was going to offer a prayer. In the infinite wisdom and providence of God, Stan was at Yale the same time Helen and I were. We were the only Free Methodists in the whole state of Connecticut. Okay, God knew that we needed some company.
All right.
But here in my living room, talking with you, if I stumble, nobody sees it.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So thanks for the opportunity.
Sure. Sure. Absolutely. Thank you for being a part of it. I will. Thanks again. And we will get you a physical award. We do actually have an award to give you, and we'll get that to you at your house at some point in the near future. But again, thank you for your time, and thank you for your service, and thank you for being a shining example of what a Greenville College University alumnus.
Yes, and hello to all the few living persons who graduated earlier than the class of '56.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right. Hey, thanks so much, Milo. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Blessings. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.